Welcome back. Benjamin Netanyahu is backtracking on controversial pre-election comments when he ruled out the creation of a Palestinian state. In an interview with MSNBC, the Israeli Prime Minister said he does want a two-state solution as long as Israel's security is ensured.
I haven't changed my policy. I never retracted my speech in Bar-Ilan University 6 years ago, calling for a demilitarized Palestinian state that recognizes the Jewish state. What has changed is the reality. Abu Mazen, the Palestinian leader, refuses to recognize the Jewish state. He's made a pact with Hamas that calls for the destruction of the Jewish state. And every territory that is vacated today in the Middle East is taken up by Islamist forces. So
but they are saying
we want that to change so we can realize a vision of real sustained peace. And I don't want a one-state solution. I want a sustainable, peaceful two-state solution.
The victory by Mr. Netanyahu's Likud party in Tuesday's vote brought a chilly reception from the White House, where relations were already strained. Here's what the White House spokesman had to say a short time ago.
What is apparent is that in the context of the campaign, and while he was the sitting prime minister of Israel, he walked back from commitments that Israel had previously made to a two-state solution. Now, to be clear, the United States, for more than a decade, under both Democratic and Republican presidents, has strongly supported this approach to trying to address the conflict between the Palestinian people and our allies in Israel.
So can a two-state solution really happen under Prime Minister Netanyahu's leadership? I want to talk about that with Aaron David Miller. He's Vice President for New Initiatives and a distinguished scholar at the Woodrow Wilson International Center. David, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Now, firstly, Mr. Netanyahu seems to be backtracking on those comments where he ruled out a two-state solution. What do you make of that?
Well, you know, I think campaigning is different than governing, number one. Number two, I think both the Prime Minister and the President and the Obama administration are playing a bit of a game here. I mean, Prime Minister Netanyahu knows, and he's conditioned his acceptance of two states on factors even as early as 2009. Prime Minister Netanyahu knows this is not his first priority. And the odds that he is going to be able to make the kinds of decisions on Jerusalem, border security, refugees, finality of claims that would be required to actually end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, particularly with this government, chances of that are slim to none. At the same time, the chances of Mahmoud Abbas presiding over a fundamentally divided Palestinian national movement, Hamas and Fatah, and Mr. Abbas's current course of action in the international community also, it seems to me, makes it highly unlikely that he can reach the kinds of decisions required. And the Obama administration, I think the president really does understand and know. Secretary Kerry may not, but the president of the United States, I think, understands that it's very long odds in the next 20 months to actually implement a two-state solution. The problem we face is that we're trapped between a two-state solution that's too hard to implement and yet one that is too important to abandon. And it's in that space, frankly, that the Americans are playing. And I think Mr. Netanyahu embarrassed them by knocking out the props under one of longstanding American positions under both Republican and Democratic administrations, at least since Bill Clinton, that a two-state solution, the illusion of a two-state solution, needs to be preserved. And that's what I think the problem was. Netanyahu clarified what he believes, and he probably is correct in his belief, the reality. The odds against this happening in 20 months are slim to none. And I also believe that cooler heads in the Obama administration understand that too.
Typically after an election, the US president would congratulate the elected leader, and that, of course, hasn't happened in this case. How would you describe the relationship between Netanyahu and Obama?
The worst. I've worked for Republican and Democratic administrations. I've dealt with a half dozen Israeli prime ministers. I've watched secretaries of state and American presidents deal with various Israeli prime ministers. This is clearly, without a doubt, there's not even anything that comes close in the modern history of the U.S.-Israeli relationship, dating back from the 70s. This is very dysfunctional. Now, Carter and Begin had a dysfunctional relationship. Shamir and Bush 41 had a dysfunctional relationship. Bill Clinton and Benjamin Netanyahu in 1996 had a dysfunctional relationship. And yet, amidst that dysfunction, there was production. What you have now is dysfunction without production. And it's being played out. It's a soap opera, basically, that's being played out over the course of the last 5 years between these two. And it's likely, frankly, to enter a new phase for the next year or so. So, you know, relations between nations don't depend or rest solely on individuals. And the U.S.-Israeli relationship really is linked and connected by so many different kinds of associations that it's hard to imagine, you know, a fundamental failure in the relationship. But there's no question that the dysfunction at the top is not a good sign.
Fascinating insight. Aaron David Miller, we really appreciate your time today and would like to continue talking, but we know you have to go. Thank you very much for joining us.
Love CNN, and thanks a lot.